Gregg and Perri and Soli all produced different projects here through the artist support program, but they felt like things that should be listened to together in a room. So I was really glad we were able to pull this event together, and thank you all for being here. And with that, I'll hand it off to Gregg to introduce his piece.
Thanks, Levi. Thanks for organizing the event. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really looking forward to the evening and really looking forward to hearing what the other presenters have brought for us to listen to tonight. My project is titled Sound and Light Signals. And it's a soundtrack that we're going to be listening to. And the soundtrack is part of an immersive install. And it is one of three parts, the other two being a centerpiece sculpture and a set of projected imagery. So the soundtrack is going to be playing in the background during this immersive install. And the soundtrack itself is of Celtic traditional music, and it's arranged with ambient nature sounds. And I want to mention that I'm here tonight with my wife, Rachel, who's been a very close collaborator with me on the project. So I'll be talking about it as my project or our project, and that's why. Rachel's been a lot of help. The project is an expression of our experiences in the Pacific Northwest. Moving on a boat, we have an older wooden boat. We go up to Alaska along the Inside Passage, and we've stopped in a number of different places and made recordings, and these are acoustically pleasing spaces. One of them is a Haida Longhouse, another is the cupola of a lighthouse, and a boathouse, a couple of chapels, and then on board our boat. And the recordings themselves were made by me primarily. The ambient recordings were also made along the way, except for one. And one of them is Waddell seal songs from the Antarctic. And they're something I'm using courtesy of the McMurdo Oceanographic Observatory. And these are going to be the spacey sounds that you'll hear in the background on the second track. There's a poem that's going to be read on one of the later tracks. It's called Fjords of Deaths, and it's by Zachary Schoenberg. And I want to make a special thank you to Zachary for letting us use his poem. The contributions to the soundtrack, I also want to mention our friends Eddie Owens, who reads the poem, Doug Lean, who plays the piano, and George Resendez, who plays guitar. Rachel has some vocals and some guitar on the soundtrack. And I want to thank the Jack Straw Cultural Center and the Centrum Foundation for their support of this project through their artist residency programs. Thank you for being here tonight, and I hope you enjoy the soundtrack.
There's a place in this world where my debts live.
A place in this world
On the west coast of Spitsbergen.
where my deaths live.
They thawed from the steep cliff walls the same day I was born.
They thawed the day I was born.
They bide their time in the endless silent sunlight,
They bide their time in sunlight,
making up beautiful songs
beautiful songs
that only one of them will get to sing.
that only one of them will get to sing.
What was that instrument that was playing throughout? Was that the bagpipes?
No, a concertina.
Oh, is that the thing you blow?
No, it's a bellows instrument.
Okay. Oh, I see. Who was playing that?
Me.
Oh, that was really interesting.
We were asked to not remove any natural or historic objects from Spitsbergen, but the others sure did. One photographer stumbled over a giant reindeer antler and audaciously tied it to his backpack. It was dyed a natural pink from the lichen last summer. After the expedition, we walked together through the 24-hour darkness to the post office in Longyearbyen, wondering if they sold bubble wrap large enough to send the 8-pointed chandelier-like structure, longer than his arm, home to his studio in Los Angeles. Being the rules girl that I am, I left everything behind. But I had been enviously watching the others for over 2 weeks now, picking up lichen, bringing ice back to the ship for whiskey cocktails, filling vials with Arctic seawater, and loading baggies full of soil. All I wanted was a stone. In this land of ice and moraine, it would not be missed. I would pick it up, put it in my pocket, and no one would ever know. The prospect of this felt dangerous and invigorating, but I tempered my desires. Most of the rocky moraine was hard-edged and pointy-sharp, yet to be softened by the slow tumble of ice and time and tides. These stones were unappealing to the hand and difficult to walk across. One of these was not my stone, though I traversed many in the wake of receding glaciers. We crossed miles of moraine, the guides remarking on the distance from where the glaciers were last year to the point they had melted to now. Near the meltwater channels, that's where the soft stones lay. I caressed dozens of them. I would pick them up, put them in my mittens, and walk for a while, warming stones with the heat that fled my hand from warm to cold in an instant. I rubbed these stones until they were the warmest that they had ever been, and traced with my thumb their ice-dug grooves. Then I would set them back down again. By day 15, the expedition was drawing to a close, and I was overcome by a penetrating need to bring a piece of the Arctic home with me. As my memories of the voyage faded, I was afraid that I would get home and forget the magnitude of the expedition without something tangible from Spitsbergen. I stood atop a wind-blown glacier, imagining my Arctic rock back in my studio, placed on the windowsill next to the other stones that have shaped my adventures and my person and my practice as an artist. On day 16, I crossed over to the land of the lawless, because there it was, a gorgeous stone on a quiet beach at the perfect moment. I was relatively alone within the polar bear safety perimeter, but apart from the group. I bent down for a closer look, admiring a very smooth stone, white like the head of a beluga, and gray like the sea and the sky in winter. In a small but knowing way, it completely embodied the interplay of landscape and atmosphere that we had been navigating for the past 2 weeks. I checked to the left, and I checked to the right, looking around to be sure no one was watching. I flexed my thermally clad knees and extended my mittened hand toward the ground with unwavering focus on the perfect stone, my perfect stone. I stripped down to the glove liner at the very last minute in the biting Arctic wind. I grasped the stone and I gave it a tug, but I could not lift it. I gave a really good yank. It was anchored to the earth by some unseen force. Then I gave the stone a kick with my giant insulated boot. Not to be dislodged. I tried for another stone, and another, but all were frozen in place. It is the Arctic in winter, after all, and not all stones are fit to be carried. I remittened my hand and trudged back to the group, wordless and pebbleless, but virtuous. So today, working in the studio, I'm longing for a stone. I ache for the sensation of holding in my hand the weighty magnitude of the experience as a whole. Something I could place in the hand of a loved one and say, here, this is from the Arctic. When a place really goes deep, it leaves you longing for a piece of it. But sometimes the pieces that you really need just can't be stolen. My name is Perri. I'm a sound artist. I say I'm a sound artist, but really, I'm interested in quiet. My passion is to record the sound signature of places, particularly places on the front lines of climate change, and to see how the sounds in these places are changing due to our planet in flux. This is why I was boarding a barkentine tall ship in Svalbard, way up north at the 78th parallel last October. I had flown 4,600 miles from home to listen to and hopefully record the signature sounds of the Arctic before they disappear. I say hopefully because recording sound is not as easy as it sounds. The Antigua was a 167-foot-long beauty, a three-masted barkentine schooner with a steel hull and 8,000 feet of sail area. It was rigged as a traditional tall ship. So imagine, if you will, the Pirates of the Caribbean go to the North Pole. But I was not alone on this boat. My shipmates were 30 artists, writers, and scientists from all corners of the globe. Each had their own Arctic art project in mind. One Slovakian was there to serenade the glaciers with her saxophone. Another artist had us stand shoulder to shoulder, chanting into a windstorm. A printmaker from Hong Kong went all the way there in her own words just to hear herself scream. And the communal sobs of several Arctic circlers could be heard, sometimes loudly, throughout the expedition. Through screaming and crying, saxophone, prayer, or silence, we each came aboard with our own version of climate grief and the carbon footprint to prove it. Many of these artists expressed an interest in sound, but none seemed to be very interested in quiet, so my work here was fairly difficult. The first few days I was really open-minded about what I was listening for, but my focus quickly narrowed to wanting to capture particular sounds that had that Arctic signature, sounds that could only happen at the poles and nowhere else on the planet. Perhaps the most iconic sound of climate change is that boom of a melting glacier calving into the sea. I was so wishing to capture the sound, but glaciers don't calve on cue. And what exactly was I hoping for anyway? Proof of a global catastrophe? A soundtrack for the end of the world? But by some miracle on day 2, I had my chance, with my shotgun mic in hand, right from the deck of the Antigua. I had just pressed record when the top lift of a glaciated expanse broke loose, right in front of me and about 10 of my comrades. The recording conditions were ideal. There was no wind and no engine because we were at anchor. I leaned over the railing, extending the trigger handle of the microphone. With headphones clamped to my ears, I closed my eyes and allowed the deep, throaty growl of the glacier to penetrate my being. When I hear in the left ear a dread-filled, "oh shit," and in my right ear, the tear-soaked moans of the sobbers. There was nothing I could do in post-production to rescue my calving glacier from the recording, which of course made me want to sob too. On day 9, we awoke to be anchored in a narrow fjord, just off a flat rocky beach with a pointed spit of land. The tip of the spit was peppered with giant ice boulders, and the fjord was flanked on one side by an enormous glacier, being carved from below by a meltwater channel. I stood at the ready to pile into the Zodiac with my microphones ablazing. But the guides were deployed first. With rifles slung over their shoulders, they beached the boats and hiked around a bit, checking for polar bears. Then they each took a post, setting up a polar bear safe zone, about the size of a football field, for the rest of us to work within. I set up a pair of microphones and a tripod on the beach, directly across from the massive glacier wall that could carve at any moment. Then I waddled in my neoprene waders to the other side of the safe zone and the ice boulders in the rising tide. Here, I belly flopped down on a chunk of ice like a little seal pup and lowered my underwater mic, my hydrophone, into the cold, salty Arctic water. Pulling on my headphones, I silenced the outside world at last, with hopes of becoming one with the Arctic Ocean. I pressed record and was graced with the unexpected. Here, I found my moment of quiet, listening underwater with eyes closed to the delicate finitude of glacial ice popping underwater. Every time an ice bubble pops in the Arctic, it releases a tiny breath of air that could be over 1,000 years old. I closed my eyes and I relished the momentary quiet between each pop, pop, zzz, pop. As if being snatched from a dream, I was yanked from the sublime sounds of the deep by a whack across my ankle. I pulled my head up and I looked over my shoulder to see the guide urgently gesturing for me to get down off the ice boulder and to follow her. Was it a bear? Everyone was running. I scurried behind her in the direction of higher ground, with mics and wires trailing behind me like some sort of electronic kelp. Reunited with the group, I took off my headphones and I turned around to see the ice boulder I had been laying on being smashed into other chunks of ice by an enormous wave. Ice ran through my veins as I watched my boulder being crushed into smaller and smaller bits, drifting out into the middle of the fjord. The guide stuffed my tripod and my open-air mics into my triple-mittened hands. To my great surprise and relief, she had rescued my gear from the other side of the polar bear safe zone, just after the glacier calved, but before the wave rolled in. I looked down at my mittens to see a tiny but steady red light in the corner of the ambient mic. I had no idea what the mics heard over there, but that little red light that meant that we were still recording. I pressed stop, knowing that soon I'd understand what happened. Back on the boat, I shed the neoprene waders, my 4 jackets, 3 pairs of mittens, and 2 hats. Safe and warm, I donned my headphones yet again and pressed play. The first sounds I hear are the cracking, moaning, and deep, clean growl of a giant calving glacier, followed by one of the guide's voice crackling over the radio. "Hey, get everyone off the beach. That calving could make a very big wave." I heard another guide repeat calmly to those around him, "This is going to be a very big wave." And then yelling, "Hey, you and the waders, get down now because you're going to be crushed in the ice." Then came the shish, shish, shish of 30 pairs of nylon pants running for higher ground, and very faintly, my noisy shipmates calling, "Perri, Perri," trying to break through my self-imposed silence. The recording continues with the sublime sound of wave after wave crashing through the ice boulder field where I had been recording. The last sounds on the recording are my own voice. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear you. I can't ever thank you enough." The voices I was desperately trying to get away from were desperately trying to save me. So my name's Perri, and I'm a sound artist. I'm interested in quiet with a new appreciation for the human voice.
This equipment might wash away. It's a big wave. Should I take it? The wave will be really big. Shall I take it? Hey, in the waders, take care. This will be a big wave. Come out. Yeah, come out because you will be crushed in the ice. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't take you enough. I can't reach you enough. Thank you. I think she's recording. Let's just keep it. Yeah, this is my gear. Oh, it's your gear? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just keep
Hafude. My name is Soli Celestial. I am a multimedia artist, and I got the opportunity to work with Jack Straw in like 2022 to 2023 to create this project. It's named Numa'lo, and CHamoru means to revive, to return. This project explores my journey of self-love, grief, life, and death, and you'll hear it. You'll hear the transitions throughout the piece. It starts off with a spoken poem and then ends with a poem as well. So I'm gonna turn the lights down, put some mood lighting on, and then we'll get started. Yeah. Sorry, it's gonna take me a second. If you need to use the restroom, it'd be a good time to do that. I think there's water in the hallway. Stretch. Any shade of blue. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Sweet. And while I was recording, I also want to say thank you to Aisha for helping me mix and master this project. Yeah, she's not here, but thank you. Try not to blind myself. I want to sit up here. I just don't want to walk around. I tear myself apart to find my inner peace. I open up my heart to love my every being. Fragmented pieces of me are scattered through time and space, trying to find their way home. cross the threshold, the glimmer of your soul smiles at me. I watch you walk into eternal peace, hand in hand with loved ones gone before. I hear your soul's melody. All my fears dissipate into the sands beneath my feet. The waves take you away to the ocean we'll always meet. Your love flows through our every being. I carry you forever with me. I'll see you in my dreams. I'll see you in the afterlife.